recording. Okay. Hi, Himanshi. Before we start, could you please introduce yourself and what your podcast Beans is all about?
Of course. So, hi, everybody. My name is Himanshi Wadhwani. I'm a second year international economics student, of course, at UBC. I have my own podcast. It's called Beans, where I talk about personal, professional, and career development. And we sort of talk to LinkedIn influencers, alumni, entrepreneurs, and leaders, and just try to pick their brains and try to understand, um, how's everybody making a difference in the world. And yes, I try to learn and just have conversations.
That is great to hear. Can you tell me what inspired you to start Beans in the first place? And why Beans as the name?
Yes. So it's a very interesting story. No, actually, it's not that interesting. I was a big yapper, and I am a big yapper, and I loved coffee at that time, and it was my first year in university, so that's why uni and then beans. So that came together. So that's how the name came up. And I started the podcast was that I went to a lot of people to discuss about my own career development initially. Mm-hmm. And then I was told that I had to follow the path of, me getting into second, third year, me getting into co-op, me getting into, that way, figuring out, the job route. But then I wanted to start very early on and have conversations with people to understand, what would I potentially like, and maybe just learn more about their journeys. And I was like, okay, how about we have all of that with a camera and a mic? So it was very simple. I just got that idea. And I used to watch a lot of podcasts back then in first year, second semester as well. So I was like, why not? Why not just have a conversation with people and understand? So I started with, just sitting in my classroom with a whiteboard, just wrote Beans and drew a cup of coffee there with my logo. That's how I drew my logo. And then, we filmed our first podcast with like my phone and the phone's mic. And today, we're able to film podcasts with like DSLR camera and then 4 mics here and there. So it's been quite a journey. Yeah.
That's great growth. Okay. So my next question was about the themes that you covered in your podcast, but you've already answered that majorly. Yeah. So my next, I'll move on from that, and I'll ask you about what your life looks like as a university student, but also a business owner, and how do you basically approach your guests, and how do you build on that podcast?
Right. So part of me starting the podcast was that I am still obsessed with LinkedIn. It's like my Instagram, right? And so so I just love reaching out to people and just, if I'm opening LinkedIn every day, I'm sending a message to at least one person I know. So part of me was just, I used to be very obsessed with just going to LinkedIn and just seeing, oh my God, this person does this and that. And I was like, oh, I have to have a conversation with them. So it's pretty much that I either ways had to use LinkedIn for my job search. And then I just twisted that to if I'm using half an hour for job search, I might as well just reach out to, people who would be just interesting to have a conversation with. In terms of uni and Beans, I'm not going to lie, it gets very difficult to manage both. There's like some months or some days you're not able to do anything. Sometimes there's like backlog in editing. Even right now, I've shot 10 podcasts, but none of them are out because, we've not had the time to edit them. Right. However, it's also that, it has given me a sort of discipline in terms of understanding and knowing more about me and then university and then what I'd like to do. So earlier I was registered in like say 10 clubs that I was not doing any work for, and I'm not learning anything. But now that I've found my passion into something and I know that to make time for that, that has given me the discipline to start working for university. So I'm getting better grades than last semester for first year, because I know that, okay, this is something that is, I have to do it because I love it so much. So I don't, I just don't procrastinate that.
You don't think of it as a work, but more like I enjoy doing it. So it's like something kind of.
Right. So that's why that's how I thought about it. Like, I like something, I have to make time for that. Okay, now what's my second priority? My studies. So that's how I make my schedule. And believe me, for a person like me, I am the most lazy person you could ever meet. But it's just that I found things to be interesting. And then for a lazy person, if they like something, they can figure out a way to do those things. So yeah.
I mean, yeah, this might sound cheesy, but like I think it was Bill Gates who said something like this. I find a lazy person to do a hard job because they find a smart way to do it.
Right.
I'm probably sure I'm not wording it correctly. But it was something
Yeah,
those lines.
makes sense though. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna ask you my next question, which is pretty different from what I just asked you. But
Right.
like, um, what were some challenges that you faced when you were just coming up with the establishing of the podcast Tuning Beans?
So I
And what are
feel
some things that you still go through? Obviously, there's like management, but then are there anything else as well?
So I feel that, wait, you might have to cut that part.
Okay. Right. So my question to you is, what are some challenges that you faced when you were just establishing Unibeams and that you continue to face, or how did you overcome them?
So I think for me, the biggest challenge was that initially when I wanted to start a podcast, I had an idea, but then people were not ready to be my guest on the podcast. And I still have that problem. Like, why would someone, maybe let's say popular or busy, would want to spend that time to even come maybe at UBC or in person to record something for absolutely no fee or no compensation. That was a problem. Reaching out to people was a problem. And then I figured out that I cannot do everything by myself. So I got one more person, and I got mentors with me, and I collaborated to find the most effective strategy to follow up and to talk to people. It was also initially that I was very afraid to start, because whenever it's something public or maybe media related, you hear a lot of things from people who do not support you. So I used to hear that the content is cringe, nobody's going to listen to it. You're here just to study, stick to studying. Where a lot of people also said that, like, just study your international economics degree, just get done with it and just get a job. There's no need to sort of distract yourself with these other things. But yeah, I mean, you get to hear all of that when you're doing something like that, which is fair enough. That's all I tell people, like, fair enough, that's what you think. But it just overcoming those mental challenges for a first year student, especially when you're all alone away from families, it's pretty difficult.
Especially you're an international student, that adds to the burden of it all.
Right.
You're all alone.
Right. But then I think it's just that if you keep going, you meet like-minded individuals that not only support you, but actually give you more ideas to succeed. So I got in touch with mentors. I got in touch with, Unimeans also has another member, Luke, who edits the videos, and he's one of my closest friends. So that's why we both came together. So I do the podcasting and sort of the face of, Unimeans, and he does all the editing and the questions sometimes as well. So you meet a lot of individuals, you form new ideas with them. And I'm not saying that we have the most perfect podcast ever. We're barely anything, but
we're just starting out. It's all part of the process.
Right. Yeah. But I feel that even on days where, like, we don't feel like doing it, we like, oh, there's a lot of backlog, we still get more guests, because we know that it's at the end, even if no one's watching, we learned something new and we met a person that I would never have met otherwise.
Yeah,
definitely. So it's just the mindset. It's literally just the mindset. But yeah.
All of that makes sense. That brings me to my next question, because you've talked a lot about reaching out to people and having mentors and guests on your podcast.
Right.
And it's obviously built your network more than just like being part of the podcast and then getting it done with. So that brings me to my next question. Like, what is one of your favorites or most impactful conversations that you've ever had with a guest on your podcast? And why do you think that's something that's so great that your audience might want to listen to?
Right. So I had a conversation with the Vice President UBC, Mr. Ainsley Kerry, and he said something which I'd never thought of. He said that you are your own brand. And when he said that, I, for like, even in the podcast, for 1 minute, I'm just like not saying anything. I'm supposed to follow, but I'm just like, really? And then it was just so obvious. But that if someone just phrases it that way, you just understand that, every interaction you have with, let's say, I'm meeting you, or I'm meeting, my friends or my family. Someday that friend who I, maybe we're in a group project, and maybe I not work as much as the other person. One day, if that person becomes the CEO of the company, he would not hire me based on my, my group project assignments.
Yeah,
Or
you're constantly selling yourself basically. So you're always in a sales loop. Is that's what I
right,
live by. That's what I live by. Like I personally, Hitesh Hasani in itself is a brand, even when it's like not established and not revenue generating, but it's still
right.
something. Like, yeah.
Right. So he changed the definition of entrepreneurship for me. Entrepreneurship for me is that a person builds, was like a person builds their own business and then making money. But then when you realize, you are your own brand, so you're just selling yourself
Exactly.
everywhere you go. And I was like, that's so important for students because we sometimes don't want to put a lot of effort for ourselves. So
Mm-hmm.
there's some days I really don't want to socialize, or I really just don't feel like going to an event. But they don't understand that if you push yourself and even do things you don't want to do, at the end it's going to benefit you as a brand. And I became from someone who people did not know at all to people actually knowing who Himanshi is. So
Yeah.
I think that aspect was very important for me as well. But then I realized, how important was just me representing myself everywhere. So even if I don't feel like doing it, I do it because I know it's gonna be beneficial, at least to me, in the future.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I love that story because like I personally try to um, make sure that my brand as myself is like visible, but a lot of people forget that they're constantly selling themselves as well, and people
Right.
definitely not from our background, like the business background or whatever, like even if they're not starting out and they're completely differently, they forget that even if you're going out for a job, it is something that you're trying to sell yourself to your
Right.
and I myself try to have people actually understand that. So I
Right.
love that story that you told me, and I definitely all and everybody follows our VP students at UBC. Everybody does. That's not something that you say new about. Yeah. I will move on to our next question, and that is how has running Unibeans influenced your career aspirations? Has it in any way changed what you looked for a couple years ago, maybe, or a couple months ago?
Um, it's a good question. So I think I've always envisioned myself becoming an entrepreneur after uni or maybe during uni. And initially I was like, because I was in such a competitive program in itself.
Right, right.
I was like, maybe I just go for the normal finance route or maybe just consulting route,
Mm-hmm.
which is still on the table. But I feel that I'm just, with uni beans coming up, I've just got more empowered to build a community and then start my own business as the nation plan was. So it's just made me more confident about my choice of pursuing entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's good. That's good. You're getting more clarity. That's always something that you appreciate as a person. Um, yeah. On that note, have you actually looked at any some of the resources that are available on the UBC campus for entrepreneurs, like E at UBC or other opportunities that are there?
Right. So
What are your thoughts on them?
I've looked at EHUBC, and for my podcast, I'd use like IKB resources. There's like a UBC podcast broadcasting as well. So I feel that all of these resources are really good for people who want to start, because it's, again, as I mentioned, like it's more less about the thing that you're studying and more about meeting the correct individuals who guide you and make you understand whether you want to pursue that specific thing. And I think for me, especially projects at UBC, I feel I've met all of them, or I was invited as a speaker there. And I feel EHUB projects at UBC just, all the individuals want to do something, want to make an impact. So I think, at UBC, these clubs that are there, more so they're, of course, there's to support your projects, but more so they're for increasing a network for the passion that you have. So I feel they're really helpful resources. And yeah, I'm using them, and I'd love to, suggest them to other people as well.
That actually brings me to my next question. In continuation to that, how you're suggesting other people to actually use those resources. What another? I mean, is there any other advice that you would give students who are wanting to start their own business venture or a podcast or anything else for that matter? But like, besides just utilizing the resources, anything else?
Right. So I think I've been asked that question on another podcast I was invited to, and then a lot of people do ask me here at UBC as well. It's just so simple, but then it's just people don't understand it. You're just supposed to start, and why I say that is because in uni it's very easy to get influenced by not doing stuff. Like you can just follow the safe path and just not do anything. So that's A, that you just get lazy. B, a lot of people spend a lot of time planning, that they either get very exhausted after that, or because they want everything to be perfect, and that they know that a lot of things are not going to be perfect, they just don't do it because they're very scared. And the simple answer to that is that everybody, whoever has started their journey at UBC or maybe not at UBC, initially has problems. Why? Because being an entrepreneurship is facing those problems and still being okay in front of, let's say, investors. Maybe your company is falling down. As long as you have that face in front of investors or people, who you're supposed to have the face, that is entrepreneurship. And so initially you get those challenges because you're being tested whether this is actually something you want to do or not. And you might actually not do it, but at least you can say I tried. And the simple advice that I'd like to give everybody is just literally starting. Even if you have the most stupid idea ever and you don't believe in it, the more you start, the more you get attached to it, the more you try to understand, okay, how do I change my thought process differently, how do I work, how do I connect. So you actually learn life skills as well. So even if it does not succeed, you're good.
It's a learning experience.
Right. And people, right. And people who've been on my podcast, my guests have had 4 failed companies, and they've had one company that they're running, and it's a multi-million-dollar company, but they have 4 failed businesses. And imagine how much pain they went through to have that company. So that's what entrepreneurship is. I'm not saying this for everyone, but I'm saying that if I'm telling you, if a person starts and they're putting their hard work and effort and they're determined, it's not like it's not rewarding. And for me, those things actually give me, a thrill to be in charge of my own career and my own business. And I'm telling you, getting a job in Vancouver is very difficult. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that
I know it.
Right. It's very difficult, and kudos to people who already got it. But also, in my mind, I was like, I want to start putting up those hours for myself as well. So yeah.
That's definitely great advice. Like you have to start something. You have to
Right.
and life is full of ups and downs. If even if you're not an entrepreneur, there's always going to be challenges that you're facing, and then you have to get up to do it. That's basically what entrepreneurship is as well. Just
right.
some more added challenges which you can have you done it. But like it's also rewarding in its own way.
Right.
Definitely amazing to have that. Yeah. Now, I want to ask you one more question about uni beans specifically before I move to my closing statements and closing questions that are more specific to UBC. Um, if you're wanting any new listeners who are listening to this interview right now or have come across the project that I'm working on, where can they find your podcast and what episode would you suggest that they start from?
So people can find Unibeans on Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, Spotify. That's
all of those
yeah,
places.
right. Yeah. We've been a bit of a backlog because of the program I have. It's just a lot of work, but I think most of them you can find there. And I would suggest them starting. Well, it depends on the kind of audience. If someone's starting to get into uni, they should watch Ariba Khan's podcast. She was a student who started from India and has her own story, and then ended up getting a full scholarship from UBC. So that's an incredible journey to start with. They should also go on, and of course, I had a podcast with the managing director of the UBC Career Center, and Ainsley Carey, vice president of UBC. So I think those are two excellent platforms to start. And then moving on, people who are interested in entrepreneurship can start exploring. We have a lot of companies with podcasts that we're going to put on. So I think, I think everybody can start with some tips and tricks from Ainsley Carey, and then maybe Ariba Khan, and maybe just go on from there to the other podcasts. Yeah.
Well, thank you for directing those new listeners to where they're supposed to go next. I was gonna ask what your future plans are for Unibeans, but specifically, you've already told me that you have so much backlog that you have to start posting
right
now,
yeah
and that's your definite first step into your future plans. But also on a larger scale, what are you thinking? How do you think Unibeans is gonna scale up in the future? Maybe in the next year or so. And
right
also, are there any new topics or formats that you're thinking that you might use to make it
right
more interesting or engaging?
Yeah, so I think Unibeans has always been about it's very interesting because I got this name very very new, like it just came up. But it's less about uni. It's like barely about uni, it
Yeah,
started off as being a uni thing, but with I especially enjoy the entrepreneurship aspect of it. And Unibeans might take a turn in terms of maybe a new name, but I know people love that name a lot. But
it's catchy. It's something you can relate with. So I would
right,
say that
right,
yeah, people
yeah,
love it.
right. But also in terms of I might dive deep into entrepreneurship just because it interests me a lot. And conversations I have with entrepreneurs, they always have. It's very interesting because every entrepreneur has something unique to say. So I might dive deep into entrepreneurship. And something I've got recently interested in is psychology. So I'm having a podcast. Yeah. So I'm having a podcast with someone called Andrew Mickey. And it's a very new term for me that he has a business about mental wealth for leaders. And it was mental wealth and mental health related. And so I'm going to have a podcast with him, and he actually is telling us, um, why do people procrastinate? What's the science behind it, and all those things. So I think that's something very interesting, and personally, I would watch it. Right.
I am just studying all of that because I'm taking social psychology as one of my courses, and I'm learning about all of this, and it's so interesting. One of my favorite classes to take, definitely.
Right. Yeah. So I might. So I might actually do that. And what else? Yeah, it's pretty much, I think, in terms of we start in terms of entrepreneurship, that's the route that I'm planning to follow. In terms of going into more about Unibeans, I think entrepreneurship is the aspect I'm gonna focus more on.
That sounds great. I'm gonna ask you one last question before I let you go.
Go, girl.
Uh,
Yes.
So this is more in relation to UBC and your courses at UBC. So I want to ask, have your studies or whatever courses you're taking, or a particular professor or anybody for that matter, specifically impacted your ideologies when it comes to your business, or just life in itself in general?
Could you repeat that question, please?
Yes, of course. My question is, now that, well, not now, it's been almost 1.5 years that you've been at UBC. My question specifically is any of your courses that you've taken so far, or you plan to take, or any particular professor or person who is part of UBC community has somehow impacted your ideologies about uni beans or just life in general? We've already touched up upon this before, but like if you could elaborate a bit more.
Right, of course. So I think my very first mentor was Nancy Clark. She's the director of the Vancouver School of Economics Career Center, and she has been, family, my mentor, my career advisor, my just person I go to cry to. So I feel that she's a person who was, you know, helped me go to the path of entrepreneurship and leadership, and she's inspired me, and she's helped me understand, because she's a leader of the career center. She's the one who runs the whole career center. I have learned a lot from her. My first job was as a marketing coordinator, at the career center. So I feel that I've learned a lot in that way. And she's always inspired me in terms of me just understanding that it's all going to be okay. It's all going to, and it was very hard for me to understand in first year, because there's a lot of anxiety in first year as to, you don't know what's going on. But that one person I feel that I've always gone to for advice in terms of me understanding who I was Nancy Clark. And so she made me understand that at the end of the day, even if nobody has anything, it is all going to be okay. Everybody figures out their path, and there's no rush. So yeah.
Well, that's definitely great advice. I love the fact that it's okay to have no plans. Like, I get it.
Right.
Plans change. It's okay to have no plans. And it's all gonna be fine. So I love that because I constantly need that reassurance when things don't go according to what I've planned. And I'm
Right.
pretty sure that's the same case with a lot of students and not just you and me.
Right.
So that's something that I would also say is great, amazing. Yeah. So thank you so much for taking out the time for this little interview and like telling me all about uni beans and yourself and giving me all the little juicy stories that I did not know about before. Um, yeah. And if you have anything else you want to say before we log off, please do so.
I feel you've done an incredible job interviewing me. I love the questions. They were very innovative questions. And of course, every interview makes me understand more about myself. So I'm very grateful for you to provide this opportunity to me. And yeah, I feel that I'm just because of all of these things, I keep going on. Believe me, there's days where I want to just sleep in, which is one of the days today. But
I understand so much. I've had a busy day and I have another meeting right after this. So like, oh God.
right. But yeah, it's just that you have to keep going on. I want to make I'm gonna be very honest. I wanted to make my name, and I'm trying to do that every single day. So yeah, that's it. And I know I'm very sure you're also on the path of that. So all the best to you.
Thank you. We should both keep carrying on and looking at
Yes.
each other's
Yay.
growth journeys and then constantly supporting. Yes.
100%. Right.
Anyways, thank you so much, Himanshi. Have a good sleep now.
You too. Bye.
Bye.